the climate crisis is real and we all need to do something about it, not just for the sake of the world, but otherwise we're not going to have any cricket, and that's what we're all here for. So today Surrey has announced its pledge to be net zero by 2030, and also its pledge to sign up to the UN Sport for Climate Action Framework. This is really important because it shows our commitment to making the world a better place. Sustainability is incredibly important across all walks of life, but especially in sports such as cricket, that of course is rather weather dependent.
So this is a net zero pledge. People that might not know what that means, what does it mean to be net zero?
To be net zero, you have to look at your carbon footprint, which is the amount of carbon that you put into the atmosphere through your operations, and reduce that as much as possible. And then with anything that's left over that you can't reduce, you need to make sure that you're putting things back into the environment to remove that carbon.
So I'm just reading the pledge now, and it says, we pledge to reach net zero by 2030, taking into consideration our scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. What are your scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions?
So your scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions form your carbon footprint. Your scope 1 emissions are everything that you consume on site and in terms of your burning of fossil fuels. That's the diesel to make the machinery work, or the refrigerants to get all the fridges cold, or even the emissions from aircon units. Your scope 2 emissions, that's all of the energy you bring on site. So that's all of your electricity. And then your scope 3 emissions is everything else. Now that's the beast. That is the people coming on site, the emissions that happens from their travel on site. It's the food and beverage that we bring on site. It's even the things that we purchase, such as the t-shirts from the shop that we are selling on. So that's where the big kind of hitters in terms of our carbon footprint are.
And obviously within the scope of the pledge, it covers most of the subsidiaries of the Surrey County Cricket Club business, but Surrey Cricket Foundation aren't within the scope of the pledge. So how are you going to be working with the foundation to help them on their sustainability journey?
So the Surrey Cricket Foundation actually sits as a separate entity to Surrey County Cricket Club and its subsidiaries. That doesn't mean that we're leaving them behind. We know that we need to work really closely with them, especially considering that they have so much outreach into the community and work with young people and also people of all ages. We're going to work on educational programmes with them and work on how we can make sure that when we're bringing people into the cricket fold, they understand that cricket actually has a place in a sustainable society.
So obviously 2030 to a lot of people seems a million miles away, even though it's not. But within the plan, it's broken up into short, medium and long-term goals to kind of keep that momentum going, give people targets within their eye line to reach for. Can you explain a little bit about the short-term goals of the club?
So the short-term goals, as a headline, is to reduce our carbon footprint by 45% based on our 2019 carbon footprint, and to increase our recycling rate to at least 60%. That is our overall headline. However, within that, we've got to do things regarding our operations, how we change the processes and the ways that we work to get to those targets. The short-term targets are really important because they set the precedent for the next 7 years, and that's really important. We have to make some drastic changes within the club to reach what is an ambitious goal of net zero by 2030.
So within this, between 2025 and 2027, that's what's referred to as the medium-term goals. What do we mean by that?
So the medium-term goals of 2025 to 2027, they are kind of formulated to make sure that they build on what we do between now and 2025. We've got to make sure that we have in our sight all of these different milestones, that we don't get complacent. They are to give us those targets from 2025 to 2027 are to give us the jump start to make sure that we hit net zero by 2030.
So then looking ahead to 2030, I'm reading here that the targets are to reduce total CO2e emissions by 80% from our base year of 2019 by 2030, and to increase our recycling rates to 90% and maintain that year on year. How realistic are those targets?
We wouldn't set unrealistic targets. We have difficult targets, but we as a club are dedicated to making sure that we are the most sustainable that we can be. Reducing our carbon emissions by 80% is incredibly ambitious by 2030, but it is something that we can do as long as we have all stakeholders on board. That includes the people on the pitch, the players, that includes the staff in the back of house, and also all of our spectators, all of our guests and all of our members. This isn't just us standing up and saying, yeah, we're going to be as sustainable as possible. It's us bringing everyone on the journey and making sure that we all know that actually the climate crisis is real and we all need to do something about it, not just for the sake of the world, but otherwise we're not going to have any cricket, and that's what we're all here for.
For a member walking through the gates on a match day who isn't an employee of the club, how can they support this plan?
So supporting the plan as a member or a guest is just about the behaviours that you exhibit on the day. Putting things in the right bin seems really simple, but it's something that can make a really big difference. The amount of CO2 emissions between general waste and recycling are incredibly large. So actually just putting something in the recycling to make a really big difference. How you get to the site, making sure you're travelling on public transport, and also all of the things that we're trying to do on site, maybe try taking them home, because it's not just about us as a club, it's about what we can do outside of the club to make sure that the entire world can reach a more carbon neutral or net zero society.
And we said at the start of this that the club has become signatories to the UN Sports for Climate Action initiative, and by signing up to that initiative we've also joined the UN Race to Zero campaign. What does that mean and why is that important?
So the UN Race to Zero campaign, which sits above the UN Sport for Climate Action framework, is really important. It is a way to bring big businesses and big sports venues together with a single purpose of having a net zero world. The UN has put together frameworks and best practices to reach that, and have set their own very, very ambitious targets. And we, as one of the signatories to that, have agreed to continually try to strive for those targets, to educate and to be open and honest about our plan. And I think that's really important.
So how can people read the Net Zero Pledge?
So if you want some more information about what we're doing as a club, please head to kiaoval.com/netzeropledge and you'll be able to read the full pledge there and get more information. Just remember, don't print it off.